Security and development are closely related to each other. It is the primary concern of every country. So how to deepen the international cooperation in global public security? How will Global Security Initiative contribute to dealing with the security challenges in today's world? From September 8th to 10th, the 2024 Conference of the Global Public Security Cooperation Forum was held in Lianyungang, Jiangsu Province. The conference has attracted representatives from 122 countries, and during the conference, we had an exclusive interview with Mr. Martin Jack, former senior fellow at the Department of Politics and International Studies at Cambridge University, talking about security, development, and international issues related to that. Good morning, Mr. Martin. It's good to have you today here in our program.
I'm very happy to be here.
What issues and agendas attract you the most as you attend this conference?
Well, this is only the second time that I've attended the forum. Last year was the first time. And it's a field of study and activity that I do not know very much about. So for me, being here these last 2 years, especially this year, is really a very interesting learning experience, which I've got a lot of ideas from percolating in my brain about the significance of this area and how it fits in to a broader view of the world. I think that is a challenge because security is obviously very important, but it can be a negative as well as a positive.
This year's forum has attracted representatives from 122 countries. You may have the chance to talk with them. So what have you talked about? What are you concerned about?
The first thing I would say is that the richness of this forum is the extremely large number of countries that are represented, and there's a big increase this year as opposed to last year. And what particularly I enjoy about it is there's many people from the developing countries, which is not true in my own country, for example. So that's a really interesting feature. And so I've had this. I can't say I've had extensive discussions since I've been here, because mainly it's a question of listening to what people have to say, and it's a sort of variety. But it's clearly a big problem. Everyone here is insecurity in some form or another, and therefore their country expresses, the problems vary according to where they're from.
From your perspective, what are the challenges and the threats of today's global public security sector, and what are the root causes of these threats and challenges?
Well, I think the rise of security as a sensitive issue has been greatly accelerated by the deterioration in the relationship between the United States and China. I don't think until now, until recently, security was always almost the first subject to discuss, the first issue. I mean, before maybe development or economic growth or what have you, but now security is right there, at the beginning, in the first sentence or the first paragraph or something like this, because everyone is now talking about security and is worried about security, and security is being used in some cases against China, for example. This is a very strong trend, I think, on the part of the USA.
Security is a precondition of development, so every country is concerned about security. But some countries have paid excessive attention to security and even generalized the concept of national security, and which will restrict development. And some other countries take the rise of certain countries as a threat to their own security. So what's your perspectives on these views and practices?
Well, I think we're really talking about America when you say that. And it is clearly a very big problem because, security for the US has become an increasingly important issue in its economic policy and its economic relations with other countries. So it's been using security as a reason, for example, why it won't send lots of high technology goods to China, and it regards Chinese high-tech goods to be a threat to its own security. So you've got this big generalization of security that sort of not confined to any issue, but really reaching out across a whole range of issues, of which I think at the moment the most important is economic. Or take dual use. I mean, you know, the Americans are using dual use as a reason why various goods can't be sent to China, or they can't take Chinese goods. But the problem with dual use in an era of technology is that, you know, everything, but the increased content of technology in products means that so many products now cross borders. You know, they can be used in military or economic or what have you. And so my fear, to be honest, is that the United States is taking us closer and closer to a situation where it becomes so restrictive in terms of economic relations that it is going to undermine not just trade, but undermine globalization to a significant extent. You're dealing with a world, the Western world, basically. It starts in America. The problem starts with America, really. And it's become, if anything, that attitude's strengthened. And so that's, in some degree or other, weakened or undermined the connections between China and these countries. So I think it is a great challenge. And I mean, until 2016, the election of Trump, even as late as then, America regarded China primarily as a competitive partner, if you like, something like that. And since then, it's come to see China as a threat. And so the world's entered a new phase now, which is America being concerned about China as a global rival. I mean, what it's worried about is losing its, you know, status as the global hegemon in the world to China, in effect. And that's how do we get through this period? Well, I think with difficulty. I think we should expect it'll probably get worse before it gets better. It'll ebb and flow, just like. I don't think this is the same as the Cold War, but the Cold War ebbed and flowed over a 40-year history. I think it will ebb and flow. Ultimately, I think a resolution to this question depends on America coming to the view that it needs China. And when it comes to that view, because of China's growing strength, and when it comes to that view, it'll be open to a better relationship with China. But how long that's going to be, I don't know, because all the direction of travel so far has been in the wrong way.
What ideas and perspectives have you brought to this forum?
Well, I think that there are two challenges for me. One is to work out exactly what the concept of security means, because there are many different dimensions to it. And secondly, how to integrate the concept of security with broader international relations and domestic affairs. And then I think it becomes very interesting. It's that integration and coordination and harmonization of security as an issue with other questions.
How do you understand the global security initiative proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping, and how will this initiative contribute to dealing with the current challenges in the global security field?
Well, I think that the significance of the initiative as one of three issues which China has chosen to be centre stage in its foreign policy, with Global Development Initiative and Global Civilization Initiative, shows how much significance China attaches to security. I think that China for a long time has been concerned about security, because it's had such a hard history of dealing with foreign powers, particularly Western powers and so on, century of humiliation, then long isolation during the Cold War and so on. And now once again the relations have deteriorated. So, and China's always seeking to deal with a situation which is not particularly favourable to it, and so security. China has a very clear idea, I think, when it's talking about security, of what that means. Although I'd also add to that its concept of security, I think, is expanding all the time and growing all the time and becoming more sophisticated.
It seems that in today's world, countries have more advanced equipment and technologies and security products, and countries stress greater importance to the national security. However, the world is not getting more secure. So why?
Well, yeah, I agree. On the contrary, in fact, what's happening is that the world is becoming more insecure. So as the emphasis on security rises, at the same time, the world is becoming less and less secure.
Yes.
Why? Well, I think the underlying reason for this is the deterioration in the relationship between China and the United States. This is the major factor. But alongside that, you've got to explain that why the world is becoming less insecure, why it's become more insecure. And I think that is because America's position in the world has become weaker. And therefore, countries are more prepared to take any matter into their own hands and push their own approach and so on. So you have a certain sort of undermining of the old global system and a kind of slightly chaotic situation developing with a lot of turmoil and unrest. Of course, the most remarkable example of this are the two wars which have been going on, one for 2.5 years in Ukraine and one for nearly a year in Gaza. So I think that all of these are products of an increase in insecurity caused by two factors. One, the weakening of the United States as a global power, and secondly, the deteriorating relationship between China and the US.
We know that security and development are closely connected with each other. And China pays much attention to the development. We have proposed the Belt and Road Initiative, Global Development Initiative, etc. So how would you evaluate these efforts?
Well, I think Belt and Road was an extraordinarily important initiative. You know, it was extremely imaginative. I mean, it's very interesting. You know, Chinese foreign policy until 2012 really was hide your capability, don't show leadership. You know, the great dictum of Deng Xiaoping, and for its era it was a stroke of genius. But by the time China, you know, after the global financial crisis and so on, China was strong, you know, it was becoming rich. It needed now a foreign policy which was more expressive of its needs in a broader sense. And Belt and Road, I think, in a way, Belt and Road defines Chinese foreign policy. The central element of Chinese foreign policy, which is a relationship with the developing world. This is the central axis of China's foreign policy, is a relationship with the developing world. And the purpose of Belt and Road is to assist the development of the developing countries. So I think it's been extraordinarily important. It's been very successful. It will need to keep moving because, you know, it started off with one idea, essentially, which is infrastructure, and it's now moving into a more diverse range of areas, including high-tech and so on. One other point, and that is, of course, you know, China's ability to help developing countries does depend on a strong Chinese economy.
Yes.
If there's not a strong Chinese economy, it can't afford to do that.
You are a Chinese expert, so can you give us some suggestions what China can do to promote Chinese modernization and also to make ourselves secure in this world?
Well, I think this is a very tricky problem for China, you know, because it's got to protect itself. So therefore it needs to have a strong emphasis on security. But to try and achieve that without becoming more difficult to have relations with the West when it is dealing with the West, which isn't not very cooperative and is quite aggressive in its intentions in relationships with China. So I think this is a difficult problem. Well, Chinese modernization is extraordinarily important, I think. I mean, what we're really talking about is China reaching a new level of development where it is on the same level as some of the most advanced industries in the West. I think that's what it means. And China has never been in that position, for many centuries. I mean, the reason why you had the century of humiliation was that the West was, Europe then was very modernized, and China lost out for a very long time, throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, essentially. So China's modernization gives it a fundamental economic strength, which, as we all know, is also the key to having military strength and the strengthening of society and so on. So this is a very, very important moment, but not only for China. It's an important moment for the developing world, because the impact of Western modernization was, by and large, extremely negative for the developing world, which was not the developing world then. It was colonized. Most of the world was colonized. As late as the end of the Second World War, the vast majority of countries were not independent. And it's only since then, with national liberation, that these countries have been able to have the possibility of modernization. And China is, I think, is the agent of their modernization. China is the exporter of modernization. In other words, its whole attitude towards the developing world is quite different from the typical Western attitude, which has been, by and large, especially in the colonial period, to stop their development. But now it's not really to help them either. China's attitude is completely different. So that's so important for the world.